Alrighty, so for those of you who didn't know, I'm writing a book, and um, I had a chapter titled "Perception and Perspective." Um, Due to everything that's been going on, I decided to change it. Before it was a little bit more lighthearted. Now it's a lot more pointed, and this is a little excerpt from what I've written so far, or should I say rewritten, because I initially wrote 6 pages worth of stuff, and then I stopped for like 5 or 6 days, and I had to revisit it. So this is the part that I started to rewrite. Perception and perspective are a lot like indoctrination and ideology in the sense that they are both codependent, incapable of existing without the other. What is perception in a literal sense? The ability to use your senses to become aware. These senses are different for everyone, of course, leading some people to perceive things differently based on the senses that are being used. For example, when you go out to eat with family and everyone's food arrives, one person may order a steak that visually and olfactorily appeases the senses. When it comes to taste, however, that perceived sense is reserved for for the person who eats the steak, which could change the entire experience due to the cut being overly salty. This added sense can change the entire experience for someone, leading them to have a different perspective on whether or not the steak is good. Perspective, as used in this example, means the understanding and viewpoint one has towards something, in this case, the steak. If I were witnessing someone eat it, I would have a much different perspective based off my perceptions involving smell and sight that lead me to believe the steak is good. I unfortunately lack the key sense of taste to make that determination, so what I perceive is actually much different than the person who actually took the first bite. In the steak example, as simplistic as I tried to make it, I highlighted the relationship between perspective and perception. My family and I all perceive the food at the table, but our perspectives on how each item actually tastes is solely dependent on whether or not we actually tried it. You can have an opinion on whether something looks or smells good, but you cannot form an opinion on whether it tastes good without actually having tried it first. So if someone at the table sees me eat the steak and I tell them it was way too salty and they go out of their way and go into the real world and tell people to avoid steaks at this restaurant because they're too salty, how could they actually know that without having tried it themselves? They wouldn't, of course, but their perspective was altered by my perceptions that I had, which is dangerous in its own right, and it's the entire emphasis on the basis of this chapter. I'm sorry, it's the entire basis for this chapter. So obviously, rough. It needs a little bit of work. I think I need to make it a little bit more clear. But the entire point of this chapter is perception and perspective that people have that they carry out into the real world. But the issue is, and a lot of people know this because as someone who's worked in marketing and advertising before, you can have a perspective and a perception that may not be your own. If I'm over here and I'm perceiving things in a certain way based off of my own personal senses, that's one thing. But if someone tells me, oh, this is what I heard, and I go out into the world and I repeat it, they may have changed my perspective on something, but I didn't bother to challenge whether or not what they heard was true. So my perspective was being, I'm not going to say was being, well, it was changed, but it was changed based off of my own ignorance towards the subject. I chose to trust in what someone else said, which is the point of all of this. It's dangerous. If I'm eating the steak and I say that it's too salty, I don't like salty things. So what's too salty for me may not be too salty for someone else. Meaning, if someone else hears me say that without having tried it, and they go and they tell everybody else, "Oh shit, that the food there is salty." How would you know that? You never tried it. I was able to change your perspective on something you never tried, simply because you trusted me, and therein lied the issue. So I'm going to flesh this chapter out, but that's essentially what this is talking about. And I want y'all to think about y'all's perspectives, and I want y'all to think about the perceptions you have towards certain things, and whether or not you were able to convince someone to change their perspective off of your perceptions. Do you understand what I'm saying? Were you able to convince someone to do something or not based off of what you perceived and not what they perceived? If the answer is yes, why did you do it, first of all? What did you stand to gain? And more importantly, what did they end up losing?